Let's discuss the latest developments with Texas Congressman Chip Roy. Good to have you back, Congressman.
Good to see you, Shannon.
Okay, so Democratic Senator Chris Murphy out of Connecticut said this today. He tweeted, Republican leaders don't see immigrants as human, just props to get some laughs and clicks. He said about this bus that arrived in Washington. How do you respond?
Well, it's pretty rich coming from Democrats who've been using immigrants as props for their own crass political purposes, while migrants get abused, get put into the sex trafficking trade, while cartels get empowered, while Texans get run over. That's Democrats' whole shtick, using immigrants as props. Now, here you've got Governor Abbott trying to bring attention to what's actually been happening in Texas on a regular basis, while Democrats like Senator Murphy and other Democrats ignore it. And Governor Abbott is trying to do the job that the President of the United States and the Secretary Mayorkas is supposed to be doing. And so, I'm glad that the governor's bringing attention to it. I'm glad that the governor's bringing attention to what we have to deal with by having the vehicle inspections and causing people to have to wake up to what happens at our border. But let's just be clear. Tomorrow, there's still going to be 7,000 or 8,000 people coming across our border. And so the only metric that I'm going to be grading anybody on how this works out is whether or not we stop the flow of traffic at the border and secure our border for Texans and for Americans so that we're not having fentanyl pour into our schools and having people get abused and hurt, whether they're migrants or Americans.
So not surprising there would be criticism from the left, but arguably also on the right. A piece in the Federalist calls out Governor Abbott, thinking that he could do more. It says he should secure the border. He could actually shut it down. Abbott's busing order is quite obviously a stunt, a cheap shot at Biden that makes no effective use of his considerable powers as governor of Texas. If Abbott were serious about securing the border, he wouldn't announce a plan to transport migrants to Washington, but a plan to take them back to Mexico. What do you make of that criticism?
Well, first of all, I want to repeat, the problem right now with the United States of America and our border lies squarely at the feet of President Biden and Secretary Mayorkas. They have a duty to secure the border, and they're failing to do it. Americans are getting hurt. Migrants are getting hurt. Our economy is getting hurt. Governor Abbott's in a tough spot. I applaud what the governor's been doing with fencing, what he's been doing to try to, put the spotlight on this and dump this at the feet of the folks in Washington. But I do agree that ultimately we can't allow this to continue. And I think that the governor ought to use Article 4 of the Constitution, recognize that this is an invasion, and that Texas is going to need to go down to the border and start turning people away because the President of the United States refuses to do his job. And look, I know there's some of these Democrats that want to jump aboard and have these bipartisan approaches to Title 42. But let's be clear. We've got a bipartisan, we've got an effort on the floor right now in the House to discharge a bill that would actually use Title 42. And let's recognize that Title 42, the health code laws, under the pandemic, that's a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. We need to right now stand up and secure the border and actually turn people away instead of allowing our country to get inundated. So I applaud the governor for trying to bring a spotlight on it. But I do agree that Texas is going to have to do more, given the complete absence and the willful abuse and disregard of their constitutional duties being carried out by the president and the secretary.
So every few days, I get something in my inbox about somebody who's visited the border, a lawmaker. From one today, Senator says this, discussed his concerns about the administration's plans to lift the Title 42 order and CBP personnel having to redirect much needed staffing away from their daily responsibilities of protecting trade and preventing the flow of fentanyl and other illicit drugs and firearms. That wasn't from a Republican. It came from Democrat Arizona Senator Mark Kelly. Is there enough bipartisan will to actually do something? And how bad do you think realistically things will get when Title 42 lifts next month?
Well, let's just keep in mind that last year we had 700,000 people released into the United States, but there were 2 million apprehensions. That means the rest of those folks were heavily turned away under Title 42. Now, what every American needs to understand is Title 42 is a health code provision. There are all these other, policies that the current administration is ignoring, like migrant protection protocols, even though they're under a court order. They're allowing the asylum rules to swallow our border security, right? They're allowing asylum to be the exception that swallows the rule. So that's the actual problem. And you know this, Shannon, because you've been following it. And we're talking about real problems, fentanyl, Americans dying, ranches getting overrun, cartels in power. And there's a refusal by the administration to recognize what it's doing to Texas and to the American people. Democrats recognize it because politically they're getting crushed. Hispanics in Texas, you saw the polls today. Hispanics are not lining up behind Joe Biden. They've been taken for granted for a long time. And so what we're seeing now are Democrats recognizing they got to do something. But one last point, just because there's now a rush to do a bipartisan bill, I don't want to hear more about plans. I don't want any more words. I've got Republicans lining up behind microphones alongside Democrats saying, oh, yeah, let's join a bipartisan bill. So they'll present a plan, and they'll say that now the public health emergency is over, so we'll just say that now Title 42 can be dispensed with. No. Let's actually make sure that the federal government has gotten rid of the emergency, states aren't actually under an emergency, and that we have regular flow of traffic between Mexico and Canada. We've got a bill that does that. Yvette Harrell's, and we've got a discharge petition on the floor. So I don't want to hear any more words. And finally, I want Texas and I want Arizona to stand up and secure our border using Article 4 into the Constitution.
Well, Congressman, keep us updated. As we always talk about, these are real human beings caught in this, taken into trafficking, held hostage. Many of them die on these journeys, too. And we got to keep those folks in mind. Congressman, thank you.
Happy Easter.
And to you, too.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.